Okay, thank you everyone for joining. This is Sheila Gallant-Halloran of Lush Life. I know most of you. I have a few new people on, and some of you are already booked to take a river cruise with me, and some of you are considering. Either way, it's my pleasure to help. I will step through what I've designed and call a beginner's guide to river cruising, and I'll have some slides that I can share with you after as well. And we'll just step through. Essentially, if you're just at the beginning of choosing a river cruise, the different considerations you should have, and then I'll talk about river cruising in general, the differences between the companies. Just to share a little bit about me here. I'm an affiliate of Vision, which is now called Direct Travel. I'm the owner of my own boutique agency called Lush Life, and I'm an adventure wellness bucket list travel specialist with the Virtuoso Luxury Travel Network. And I'm a certified river cruise expert with the best of the best river cruise companies. Just to share with you some of my awards, I have won Virtuoso Wellness Luminaries Legends and Leaders Award last year, which was a wonderful accomplishment for me personally to be recognized by this worldwide travel network. And not very many Canadians have won an award, so I was thrilled with that. And I'm also a top producer in the Virtuoso cruises and voyages, in addition to wellness and adventure travel. But I just have a picture here with Matthew Upchurch, who's the leader of the head of the Virtuoso Network. This is our annual cruise night out, the White Night, where the top producers are invited to a special party to celebrate all their accomplishments during the year. And this is a picture of me with my wellness award last year and the head of Globus and Avalon River Cruises. So for those that I haven't worked with closely with before, just let me share that I am award-winning travel advisor. I have hundreds of validated client reviews and testimonials. Over 99% are positive, and they would recommend me to a friend or colleague. I also am sought out to give press interviews and make TV appearances. I just appeared on Daytime Ottawa. There's a picture of some of my awards and press conferences where I was interviewed as formerly an actuary, and I say that I traded return on investment rather for return on life as a travel advisor. Here's an award I won for being the top Canadian travel advisor as well as a talk I made to Canadian Tourism Roundtable in the pandemic and the impact it was having on the travel industry. For you, you need to know that I'm connected to all the river cruise partners. I'm a preferred partner with all the best brands. That's AMA Waterways, Uniworld, Avalon, Scenic, Emerald, Viking. And I meet with my partners and I travel with them. I put hundreds of clients on board with them. I meet them every year, both in Vegas at Virtuoso Travel Network. This is myself with Alex, the head of AMA Waterways, and Gary Murphy, the head of AMA Waterways, Tony Logan from Virtuoso, Michelle Palma is here, Executive Vice President of Uniworld, with Ellen Bettridge, who's the CEO of Uniworld, and this is myself and Ellen as well. Myself with Neil from AMA, and Tracy from Scenic. I just selected a couple of pictures to put in just to let you know that I'm connected and have personal relationships with all of these suppliers, which means not only do I get special access to sales and advantages that you couldn't get if you went through the agency or travel river cruise company directly, but because I have these relationships because of the volume that I do with the company, as well as the company that I'm affiliated with, Direct Travel, which is a large company throughout Canada and the US, I can get both advantages in terms of sales promos, but special resolution if issues occur, and I work with my partners, and it's to our benefit to obviously keep our mutual clients as happy as possible. So just to share with you too, I have traveled on almost all the brands, different river cruises throughout the Amazon, so more adventurous river cruise expedition kind of river cruise company, certainly Vienna, Budapest, Switzerland up here, France, I've done the Rhone River Cruise, Paris, the Seine, and this is the Amazon as well. And for those of you a little bit more adventurous, if you take a river cruise in the Amazon, you could go fishing for a piranha and maybe have it for your dinner, which is my husband Bill here. It's what we did on the Amazon River. So just generally to share with you, the things I'm going to go through now is the similarities between river and ocean cruising for those that haven't done it, and also just give you that sense of the similarities, the 10 similarities between river and ocean, the 3 biggest differences between river and ocean, the 8 things you need to decide before selecting river over ocean, the 7 steps you need to take during, and the 6 things to do after. So just want to check in, anyone having any issues or problems hearing me or seeing the slides? Please let me know if you do. You can type in the chat or speak up. Okay, let's jump through. So the 10 similarities between river and ocean cruising, you know, they're both moving vessels, obviously. You're in a moving hotel room. The benefit of taking a cruise is that you unpack once. You unpack when you get on board, and then you don't pack again till you're leaving. So you get to visit multiple destinations and have that moving hotel room. You enjoy planned activities on both river and ocean. You have safety briefings. They're a little less complicated on a river cruise because it's a much smaller ship, but you still have safety briefings. The fare on river and ocean includes most of the food and fun, although river cruising does include more than the typical ocean cruise, unless we're talking about a luxury line like Regent, or now Crystal's come back in the fold, or even Silver Sea. Those brands tend to include a bit more than the more moderate or even entryway to luxury on the ocean. River cruising tends to include beer and wine at lunch and dinner, and then depending on the brand, a bit more. And river cruising tends to include your shore excursions as well, and we'll step through that a bit more. But also, both river and ocean are going to have private baths and storage, internet and Wi-Fi, onboard learning or lectures, and access to fitness. So the 3 biggest differences between river and ocean cruising, one's a river, one's an ocean, and that's obvious. But what you might not have thought of is that ocean cruising tends to go around the outside of a country, and river cruising goes through the heart of a country. So for example, if you're on an ocean cruise that takes you to Rome, you're not actually in Rome. You're about an hour and a half away. You have to get on a motor coach or have a private car and transfer take you downtown to Rome. If you're on a river cruise and you're in Vienna, you step off the ship and you're in Vienna. So it's very different that way. And also the rivers themselves tend to be tied to trade historically, especially through Europe. And that's why a lot of the small towns and villages were built up along the rivers. The ancient world, if you will, was developed along the rivers. So then we have docking and location. I just referred to the fact that ocean-going cruises, especially if you're going somewhere like Rome, it tends to be outside the center of the city. Depending on the size of the ship, you might actually have to get a tender to get, if the ship is large, to get you into the smaller wharfs With river cruising, though, it's very different. You're sailing through the heart of that spot again, as I mentioned. So you're going to have quicker access. You're going to be able to walk off the ship faster. There are much smaller crowds on river cruising, so you don't have those long lineups that you might be familiar with if you've done ocean cruising and showing ID and going through X-ray machines. I mean, you have to show ID on the river cruise. You have to check yourself in and out, but it's a very simple matter of scanning your ID, and you're not going to be X-rayed for, if you take a bottle of wine from on shore, it's not a problem to bring it on board. And because of that, because ocean cruising goes around a country and river cruising goes through the country, necessarily you have different ports that you're going to see on an ocean versus a river. So the river cruises will go to Amsterdam, Vienna, Budapest, Paris, Prague. Well, Prague's not technically on the ocean, on the river. It's 3 hours away, but you take a river cruise on the Danube and you end in Vilshofen or Passau, and the river cruise company typically has an extension that's going to take you to Prague. On an ocean going cruise, you're not going to visit Prague. And so the other cities, of course, that are possible on rivers are Lyon, Strasbourg, Avignon, St. Petersburg. Hopefully we'll get back to, please God, the world chaos settles down. The Nile River, the Mekong, Vietnam, and Amazon. So the river going cruises gives you very different destinations than you would have on an ocean going cruise. So we talked about the 10 similarities. We talked about the 3 things that are the biggest differences. And now I'm just going to touch on the 8 things you need to decide before selecting. And again, just want to check in. Are there any questions or any problems thus far? Assuming we're good, I'll keep going. And again, if you have anything you need my attention, please either speak up and put your microphone on or put a note in the chat. Okay, the biggest thing that I get for those that have done ocean cruising and are thinking about river cruising, seasickness is sometimes a concern. With ocean going cruises, even though a lot of the ships have modern stabilizers now, there is still that motion and movement. And depending on the oceans that you cross, the waves can be high. So some people love that, others don't. If seasickness is a concern, you never have to worry about that on a river going cruise because there are no tides. You always see land and you're getting on and off the ship every day as well. And that's a benefit of the river cruising. Ocean going clients who really prefer the ocean cruises really like those sea days where you're sailing. You might have a full day and a half before you get off the ship, sometimes 2 days, depending on the destination. If you're doing a transatlantic, it could be even more. So if you enjoy the sea days, ocean cruising is for you. If you want to step off and see the ports every day, river cruising is for you. The river going cruises too tend to sail more March to late fall in Europe. We have the Christmas markets now that are picking up in a couple of weeks. They tend to start around Advent with the Christian calendar. So it almost aligns or typically aligns with American Thanksgiving. It tends to be the 3rd Thursday roundabout. And it generally stops before Christmas because their Christmas markets are crafts and food and chocolate and mulled wine and all those great things. So it's kind of in the lead up to Christmas. So typically river cruising is going to be March to late fall, beginning of December, but we are seeing some extensions of the river cruises now. We're starting to see companies, we're seeing AMA and I think Uniworld and Viking are starting to step into that January, February breach that no companies had sailed before. And the idea being it's still going to be warmer than it is in Canada or the United States at that time, and you're going to be in Europe. So yes, you'll have to wear the coats and gloves that you would wear at the Christmas market time, If you go to south of France, for example, though, on the Rhone, it's going to be quite a bit warmer than if you're doing the Danube. But we're starting to see that extension of the calendar. So what used to be late March to end of November, beginning of December, we're now seeing January, February, and some river cruise companies are actually doing New Year's Eve cruises. So while the formal markets that change in every city according to dates when they open and close, the cities are still going to be decorated for the festive season. Some will actually have a post-Christmas segment, and some will actually just people want to see the cities decorated for the holidays and celebrate the new year. Ocean-going cruising, though, doesn't have those ties to the calendar like river cruising does. It does tend to be year-round, but it does tend to be destination specific. For example, you'll tend to do the Caribbean cruises January to March, for example. You'll tend to do Alaska cruises April to October. So you kind of have things that change with the season, and ships tend to get repositioned too, that the Caribbean cruises might do a repositioning cruise to get them over to the Mediterranean after the Caribbean cruises are finished. So it's a very different layout and schedule between the river and ocean. And since I was mentioning the Christmas markets, let me just mention for those that are religious or celebrate the different seasons, what's picking up now too in Europe are the Easter markets. So if you like to travel at that time and see the crafts and the artisans in the different seasons, the Easter markets are picking up in spots like Hungary and Czechoslovakia as well. And then, of course, with March comes the tulip time for the river cruises too. So if you have always wanted to go to Amsterdam to see the tulips, certainly the Kukov Gardens in Amsterdam tend to be open the end of March to say the end of May. That's a good time to take a tulip river cruise. We have the types of rivers as well that I mentioned. We have the Rhine. In Europe, the two that are the most popular for those who've not taken a river cruise before are the Danube and the Rhine. The Danube are going to be the ones that tend to do the cities like Budapest and Vienna, maybe go to Salzburg. So those architectural, historical, Habsburg family, historical concert-going art museums, those kind of things are on the upper Danube. If you go into the lower Danube, you could go into Romania, of course, and see the Iron Curtain, the Iron Gates. And then, of course, the Rhine River is going to take you through the Rhine Gorge. You'll sail for 3.5 hours and see 30 plus castles as you sail through the Rhine Gorge, but more smaller villages and towns that you'll see on the Rhine rather than the Danube with the bigger cities of Budapest and Vienna. The Seine, of course, is going to take you in and around Paris, the Douro in Portugal, the Volga in Russia, the Yangtze in China, the Amazon, Peruvian Amazon, Irrawaddy, Burma, and Chobe. And for those that don't know, you can take an African river cruise on the Yangtze River, the Zambezi River ship, Yangtze is China, on the Chobe River. And it's much smaller ships. If you want to take a safari by river cruise, it's an excellent alternative. And then, of course, you can add on Rwanda, Cape Town, those kind of things as well around the river cruise. The ocean-going cruises, you're not going to go see the Panama Canal on a river cruise. You're not going to go to Alaska, Galapagos, Hawaii, the Med, transatlantic Iceland, Australia. Those are ocean-going cruises. So again, if you think of your geography, the river cruising is going through the heart of a country, and the ocean-going cruises tend to go around the country. Okay, 8 things to decide, continuing along. What's key to you, the ship or the destination? Do you want a lot of choices? How many and who will be traveling? And do you want the cost fixed up front? So those are the differences between river and ocean. River going cruises are very small. They all in Europe tend to be the same size, with the exception of Ama's double wide ship called the Ama Magna. But all the river cruise ships, while the companies will call them long ships or different names like that, starships, spaceships, they all typically are the same size. And in the industry, we call that the box. They all tend to be the same length, width, and height because they have to go under the same bridges. They have to collapse the upper deck while they're going under bridges. They have to go around the same corners. So they're all the same size ships. Whereas ocean-going cruises can be floating cities. You can have 6,500 people on some ocean-going cruises. They can have penthouses, rock climbing walls, skating rinks, casinos, a whole host of things you'll see on the very large ocean-going ships. River cruising is a much more intimate experience. They're much smaller ships. The largest river cruise ship is Viking with 190 people they put on board. But if you think about all the ships are the same size, except for that Ama Magna I mentioned. So if you're putting 190 people on board and another company with the same size ship is putting 150, necessarily that translates to some things are lost with the 190 and some things are gained. If you put 190 people on, the cabins tend to be a bit smaller. Viking strips away things like the bikes on board, salons, exercise rooms. They put more people on, so they try to keep the price point a little bit lower. But as a result, they've stripped away a lot of the extras that some of the other companies include. Ama, for example, has 158 to 164, depending on the ship. Uniworld as well will have something comparable. Smaller ships will have like 130 on board Uniworld. And with Tauke, you have some ships that are 113. But river cruising is never going to be more than 190 people. Even the Ama Magna, which is a double wide ship, it has 3 restaurants and has a pickleball court, if anybody's into pickleball. It's double wide, it's only on the Danube. But even the Ama Magna has 190 guests on board. So you're not going to take any river cruise ship that has more than 190. So then the next question then is, do you want a lot of choices? With ocean going cruising, you can have those 24-hour buffets, you can have 5 or 6 different restaurants, you can have Broadway shows, different kinds of pools, casinos, libraries, all those kind of things. River cruising is a much smaller ship, so they tend to have one main dining room, a lobby, public area with a bar, tends to have a bistro. Some brands like Ama will have a chef's table restaurant. The Ama Magna has 3 restaurants, but generally speaking, they tend to have the bistro, the lobby, and the main restaurant. Tauke is another example that has Arthur's Bistro, another bistro to give you somewhere different to eat and experience. But that tends to be the way that river cruising goes. It's a much smaller and more compact ship. So obviously, if you have 190 people on board versus 6,590, they necessarily don't need to have all that space and all those options for food delivery because you're dealing with people on a much smaller scale. With river cruising too, it tends to be more of a cultural focus. You have fixed times, but there is flexibility in that. You don't have to everybody show up at 7 o'clock to eat, but it does tend to be a more collegial experience that you'll go and have, and I use Ama as the example, a sip and sail cocktail hour that might be from 6 to 7. You might hear the cruise manager talk about different things. And then when that wraps up at 7 o'clock, people tend to go together and eat together. In the morning, different restaurants on river cruises will have different options. Ama and Uniworld and Tauke, they all tend to have, and Avalon, tend to have something in the lobby or public area, kind of a late risers thing for continental breakfast. But generally speaking, there's breakfast in the main restaurant. One of the benefits, I think, of COVID is that we've done away with the buffets completely on river cruising, and you know, river cruising was really set up. It was meant for social distancing before social distancing was a thing, right? Like it's much smaller, it's more intimate. So it was quite easy to take away the buffets and have, which were really only used at breakfast and lunch, and kind of have table service. I think the buffets now on the last river cruise I was on in April was really just fruit and pastries were laid out that you could pick up, and otherwise everything was table service. And the costs fixed up front, number 8. That's another big thing with ocean going cruise. Again, unless you're taking the luxury lines that are more all-inclusive and you pay for it up front, generally speaking, other than Regent, Crystal, Silversea, on an ocean going cruise, you tend to pay for your cabin, and then you're going to pay for your internet, you're going to pay for your beverages, you're going to pay for your shore excursions. With river cruises, it tends to be a more inclusive experience up front. Your beer and wine's included, your shore excursions are included, your Wi-Fi is included. So then the additional things are really going to be depending, that'll be some of the differentiators between the brands of what they actually include. Just take another sip here. Any questions, please pop in the chat. Okay, just to mention, I get a lot of questions about weather issues for those that are considering their first river cruise. And I can tell you weather, well, weather is kind of crazy right now. Who'd have thought any of us would be dealing with some of the issues in if you live in Ottawa like I do, we've certainly seen multiple storms that are not what we're used to. And the weather patterns that we know of old have certainly changed. But river cruising will be subject to the water ebbs and flows, which means if it's a dry, hot summer, that might lead to not a lot of rain and might lead to variances in the depth of the water. On ocean-going cruises, of course, you have hurricanes and storms. And those of us in Canada and most parts of the US are quite familiar with snowstorms and what we have to do, and we aren't really stepping out of our comfort zone. If that happens, we know how to handle it. The same too for those that live along the rivers or are taking the ocean-going cruises. The companies are always going to make sure that their guests are safe. But I do get a lot of questions about river cruises and the water level. So I'd just like to put in this slide. This, I think I grabbed this picture from Passau. I don't know if you can see it too well, but there are markings of the height of the water at different years. And 1920, 2002, 1895, 1899, 1802, 1700, 13, and so on, 1501. So over the last 500 years, these have been the heights of the water. High water can happen just like low water can happen. So the towns will track that. And we can't predict it. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it's just like the snowstorms here. Some people like to look at Farmer's Almanac or whatever to give an idea of what the weather's going to be like one year to the next. What I tend to do is look at 30-year averages and share with people. This is typically the level of rain that comes in the summer, the typical weather patterns. Of course, weather is changing quite a bit with all the climate issues we're seeing, but really all we can do is look at historical averages to get an idea. I do work with companies that do their best to mitigate issues if and when they happen. For those of you, there are some on board this call I've booked AMA Waterways cruises with, AMA Waterways is a company that has lower drafts on their ships. They're built and designed that way so that they displace less water than other river-going companies. So that means they can often sail in low water when other companies have to stop. So that works to clients' advantage to book with AMA. If the water does tend to get a little bit lower even than that, or we're dealing with a company such as Uniworld, Avalon, or another company that deals with low water, high water, they will still work with the clients as best as possible to give them the experience that they signed up for. No one wants vacations to be interrupted. A lot of companies I work with have sister ships, so that means if you're sailing from Budapest to Nuremberg and another person is sailing from Nuremberg to Budapest, companies that have sister ships, they will often be sailing in opposite directions. If there's a problematic area on the Danube, for example, they would sail both ships to that problem area, and then the clients pack up and switch ships. They go on the sister ship to continue their cruise along the way with that. And I actually experienced that on AMA last March, not because of low water, but because I was in France during the labor disputes. And so I got to experience the sister ship swap because we were getting to the south of France, and the labor disputes actually had some folks draining a canal in the south of France so that the river cruise ships couldn't sail. So AMA, in that case, took both their ships and sailed it to the problem area. I started my cruise on the AMA Christina. I finished my cruise on the AMA, it was the AMA Certo. So I got to see how that worked up close and personal. Other companies do that, of course, as well. They want to ensure that you have the best possible experience you can have. But it is a little bit like snowstorms in Canada, as I mentioned. And just to give you an idea, this past month, in fact, this past 2 weeks, we have seen low water on the Danube, in Budapest in particular. And the companies were working around that. They got rain and that issue was resolved. But the companies ended up not actually bringing their ship into Budapest. They brought people to the neighboring town. And just 2 days ago, I had clients on the Douro River in Portugal, and they had high water. And again, they were on board Scenic, and Scenic did a great job to give them the experience as best they could, and work around that issue to ensure the guests are safe and healthy and still have a great experience. So I just like to mention it because I get a lot of questions about this, and I just want people to be aware. We can't predict it, but we work with companies that'll do their absolute best to ensure that you have a great experience. Okay, which one is right for you, river or ocean? I'd like to refer to river-going cruises almost like a mom and pop shop, and the ocean-going cruises are more like Las Vegas. So if you've been to Vegas, you know multiple restaurants, dance clubs, a lot of noise if you want it, although you can find quiet areas too, just like you can in Vegas. But there's a lot of choice, a lot of movement, a lot of activity, a lot of hustle. So it does feel more like a city. McDonald's to a certain extent, unless you do the premium brands or like Oceana or Azamara or something of that sort. But some of the bigger brands, the more family-friendly brands especially, can feel like, it's that one-stop shop where they're trying to get as many people as possible to have that experience. And then river cruising is more like Anguilla, right? So if you've been to Anguilla in the Caribbean, it's very quiet, very small island. It limits the number of people that can come in because the island itself is only 3 by 16 miles big. So it's just like the difference, if you think of cities, the difference between Anguilla and Vegas is really the difference between river cruising and ocean going cruising. I go to Vegas every year. It's my Virtuoso luxury travel network. I like the shows in Vegas. I like the restaurants. I like the choice. So I certainly have that coming into my work and my holiday planning. But for me personally, I prefer the quiet of somewhere like Anguilla, which is why I've been on 35 ocean going, maybe 40 now, ocean cruises. And I've been on a dozen or more river going cruises. And for me personally, I prefer the river cruising, and that might just be because I'm getting older too. My kids are getting older, and I don't need all that variety and activity of the ocean going cruise. River cruising is going to be calmer, as I mentioned. There's no waves, there's no tides, so you're having that very easy, no seasickness, leisurely pace. The ship is going to be moving slowly, and it's small. And as we mentioned before, the ocean going cruises can have a lot of decks, can have a lot of ocean movement and waves, and can be very different experience that way. It can take you 20 minutes to get from your cabin to the restaurant if you're walking on an ocean going cruise. In 20 minutes on a river going cruise, you can walk around the entire ship. So totally different scale. River going cruises tend to appeal to the 55 plus. There are clients there are cruises that are appealing to the family brands. AMA partners with Adventure by Disney. Uniworld partners with Butterfield and Robinson. AMA also partners with Backroads. There are family brands. Uniworld also has a generation family programming. Tauk has a family bridges. So it's not to say that there are no kids welcomed, but it does, unless it's an explicit family iteration of the river cruising tends to be a more adult experience than the ocean going cruises would have. And some brands like Viking require everyone to be at least 18. So you see that differences. It's more of an adult feel. It's more cultural history. You can certainly have children, if they're well traveled, on non-Adventure by Disney, say on AMA, but then we get into the cabins. Most river cruise cabins only accommodate doubles. There are some triples, there are some quads. They're very few and far between. It depends on the ship. And again, it tends to be those ships that Adventure by Disney might charter on a different season, for example, and then it would be a different product. But when Adventure by Disney is not using that ship, then AMA is sailing it as a regular brand. So Uniworld 2 would have some, Avalon has some rules about kids, Tauk has some rules as well. Tauk has some ships that have a fold-out bed. So there are examples that you can do it, but it does, generally speaking, it's going to be 55 plus, although we're seeing the age coming down. The wine themed cruises especially are making it more 45 plus. And we're also seeing active cruises, and that is bringing down the typical age, but also we're all living longer. We want to live as well as we can for as long as we live. So we're seeing a lot of active options come in on the river cruising as well. And how do you choose your river cruise line? So I work with clients. I have preferred partners I work with that I love and I work with all the time. I put hundreds of people on board a river cruise every year. And if you've come to me through a lead program that I'm working with a particular company, if you've put in an info request, then I will work with you on that brand, of course. But I do know all of the brands and can help you compare and contrast. I have preferred ones, of course, as I mentioned, because we've all lived through the pandemic. But if you lived through the pandemic as someone who works in travel, you have a very different experience and understanding of which companies have strengths and where their weaknesses are. And I can tell you, I know exactly which companies I tend to put clients on and know that they're going to be very safe. For example, I think we have Vantage on here, and they've now gone bankrupt. Crystal went bankrupt. They are now coming through. Their ships were sold to a company named Riverview, I think, but Riverview didn't do as much with them as they were expecting, and Uniworld has just chartered those ships. So those beautiful Crystal ships that were beautifully designed, Crystal got into trouble with the pandemic. They had to sell them off, and now Uniworld is going to rebrand them as Uniworld ships. Talc, of course, does the Skilla ships. They charter ships as well. AMA owns all their own ships and is debt-free. So we see that differences. We see like a Rosa is a very Germanic almost brand that's in Europe. Very almost like IKEA in terms of the furniture and that kind of thing. And then you see Scenic, which is a more out of Australia, more Scenic, and Uniworld and Talc, Crystal, Uniworld / now are tend to be the more 5-star, just in terms of what's included. AMA will be 4.5-star because they don't include alcohol at all times. Avalon, I'd put maybe close to AMA, but there are some differences between Avalon and AMA. And Viking would be more like Emerald, giving you that mass market type of idea in terms of a river cruise. Doesn't include everything, puts more people on. Price point is a little bit lower, but then when you add things on, you might have a bigger bill when you're getting off. So then you have to think about what style of the box. Remember, I talked about the box is the box. So if all river cruise ships are the same, they differentiate themselves with the number of people on board, and that's point number 2 here. Viking puts 190, AMA 158 to 164. Some ships are a little bit less. Talc 130, some ships are a bit less. Uniworld depends on the ship. I'm taking a group on the River Duchess. We're going to have 130. The ships they've just taken over from Crystal will have a few less. They have some bigger ships too. But again, the river-going cruises are not going to have more than 190 people. And this is what we talked about before. The locks on the main rivers are 12 meters and wide and 190 meters long. So for my American friends, that's 40 feet wide and 625 feet long. So automatically that means the ships to travel the European waterways tend to be the same size. And they all have to turn around the corners and go under bridges, as we mentioned. What differentiates a brand, Sam, besides how many people they put on board, is the level of service. And I like to draw the comparison to a car company, because while a Toyota is going to give you great gas mileage and is going to give you the 4 doors and storage and get you from point A to point B, it's a very different product than a BMW, which will have more service, more bells and whistles, maybe some additional inclusions. And so it is with the river-going cruises too. There are Toyotas, there are BMWs, there are Rolls Royces. So you just have to figure out what is important to you in terms of the inclusions, and that tends to go with the service level and the quality of the food as well. You can have a butler on a river cruise. This is an example of Uniworld. If you book a suite, it comes with its own butler. So, and I spoke with someone this morning who decided not to do a river cruise, decided to do a tour, motor coach tour instead. And the one thing I just have to make you remember is if you ever do a motor coach tour, you're going from point A to point B. Your one day in Rome might be you get in Rome at 4 p.m. and you're leaving 6 a.m. the next morning. You have to pack and unpack, and then you have to go see the sights. And that is not the experience on a river-going cruise where you unpack and you're in that moving boutique hotel room. And again, too, this is an example of Uniworld with the butler. They will help you unpack. You can see the butler serving in the background here of this picture. There are lines that have that. There are lines that don't. It's just figuring out what's important to you. If you want to be active, we're seeing a lot of cruise companies bring in that level of activity. We're seeing wellness coaches on board. We're seeing yoga classes being offered, bikes on board. Again, this is not something that's offered on Viking, but other brands do have it. This is an example of Amma on the left, and on the right we have Uniworld. Tauck also has some family people on board to assist if there are family bridges cruises. And we're starting to see this trend towards wellness and being active. You know, you can get up and do a sunrise yoga class. You have bikes on. You can choose your excursions. You can, for example, with Uniworld, it might have a Let's Go excursion that's very active, or you might have a regular pace one, or you might have a slow pace one. And you can pick and choose according to your fitness levels and how busy you want to be. Then, of course, you have to choose the type of cabin. So you can either have, river cruising tends to have three main cabin differences. One is called the entry level. It's also called the Swan View. I don't think I put pictures in, but I can share them with you if you'd like. That tends to mean you're on the lower deck, a fixed window 5 feet off the ground. You have to stand up to look out. The window doesn't open, but it does let light in. You stand up to look out, you see swans that are on the river. That's why it's called Swan View. But when you lie down, you're underneath the water. Then you tend to have the French balcony. If you have a deck on your home, it's like that sliding door, full floor to ceiling glass that slides open, but there's nowhere exterior to sit outside. There would be a foothold for you to put your foot outside and poke your head out and take pictures, but there's nowhere exterior. So the next step up then would be an exterior balcony. And that would have a small table and chairs outside your cabin for you to sit outside and enjoy a glass of wine or a cup of coffee. And then above that would be a suite. And a suite tends to be a balcony plus and is generally 1.5 to 2 times the size of a regular cabin. And I mentioned here, we talked about water level, where it is, the location on board the ship is also going to factor into the pricing. And the pricing, the entry level are going to be the most economical. You pay a premium to step into a French balcony, and to step into an exterior balcony, another premium above that. And for a suite, higher again. Theme sailings. You can do wine lover cruises. Some companies like Amma differentiate themselves on having wine themed cruises. They bring some vintners from Canada or the US to have their New World wines, and then you're visiting the old countries and the old world wines, and you get to compare and educate your palate about the differences. So there are some like that. There are others that multi-generational. We talked about the family ones before. Uniworld does a lot of Jewish heritage cruises. If you are Jewish and that appeals to you, to understand that history. They also have done things like watercolor cruises or beer and wine. I think Avalon has done some beer tasting cruises. Amma also does ancestry cruises. Uniworld, a variation called U River, has done even drag queens and tattoos, tattoo artists. So there are various iterations that might appeal to you according to theming. Generally speaking, it does tend to always emphasize art and music and good food and wine, but then you can build upon that and add additional things. The bells and whistles I mentioned, the fitness classes, pools, salons, those kind of things. Multiple dining rooms aren't everywhere. Chef tables aren't everywhere. Some offer cooking classes and some offer room service. And then you got to look at prepaid gratuities, whether they're included or not, and how to add. Airport transfers, whether they're included or not, and how to add. And then the drink options. I mentioned beer and wine tends to be included with all river cruises. Viking and Avalon will have beer and wine at lunch and dinner. Amma will have a sip and sail cocktail hour in addition to that. Tauck and Uniworld will have all the alcohol you want anytime. So if you want to get up and have champagne or Jack Daniels for breakfast, you can. These are the differences. It does tend to lead to differences in the price point as well. So that's why you have to think about that when you're choosing. They don't tend to offer beverage packages like the ocean-going cruises do, but it depends on the river cruise company what's included. And just an example, this is a AMA wellness class I mentioned. AMA is also a member of Les Chaînes de Rôtisseurs, which is a French gastronomical society. And AMA is the only river cruise company that's been invited to participate in that. But the food and wine on board most river cruises is going to be exceptional. You're going to have a fantastic time. I have a picture here just to show you in the upper left-hand corner. This is called double docking or rafting. This is when two ships tie up together. It's very common on the rivers. Again, the rivers aren't very wide, so it's very common to have two ships tied up together, which is why river cruising is not accessible to those in wheelchairs, or if you have an electric scooter. You have to be able to board the ship under your own steam. You have to be able to go up and down stairs. If you do use a cane for walking, we can work around that. You might have to book a cabin that's or a walker that you can collapse. You might have to book a cabin on the second deck or higher and have someone with you if you ever have issues for emergency. Because of insurance, of course, they can't be responsible for you getting on and off the ship. But this is quite common to see on the rivers. So, you'll see that on the Danube, the Rhine, and most of the European rivers. And here's an example of me in Provence. I went to a truffle tasting truffle farm and tasted the difference between winter truffles and summer truffles. Didn't realize there was such a thing. So education and educating your palate and taste buds as well is fantastic. And can't quite see the bridge too well here, but this picture on the bottom left is in Budapest. Budapest typically has a very steep bridge that connects a river cruise ship to the shore. So you do have to keep that in mind getting on and off the ship. And you can see from these pictures inside the cabin, the bottom right-hand side as well. This is in a French balcony cabin. The other one on the left might have been an exterior cabin, but you can see that you can see shore. And that's a major difference with river going cruises. And the same on the bottom left-hand, you will always see shore. You will hear birds, you will see cars. So it's really a fantastic way to travel. Okay, we talked a bit about the high window being the swan view and the differences between the cabins, the theme. Oh, I might have put that cruise in, that slide in twice, pardon me. I think we've talked about all that. So if you're picking a cruise, I will work with you to pick out the best cruise that matches what you're looking to do. I'll have conversations with you about maybe the kind of car you drive is a good indication, but perhaps too the kind of hotel you like to stay at, right? So whether it's a Hilton or a Four Seasons, and the River Cruise Hotel, the cabin itself, is going to kind of align with those preferences, right? If you're on Uniworld, Uniworld has the Savoir beds of England. If you've not heard of those beds, they are $50,000 handcrafted beds that are the best in the world. You'll have the best sleep, but that's part of Uniworld's brand, right? It's giving you that luxury treatment on board. Not every river cruise company does that, but that's how they differentiate themselves. So comfort and space, quality of the culinary experience. I mentioned AMA and Uniworld as well for their food. Tauk as well has great food on board. Just gives you those differences and your budget. And then after you select the cruise, running a little bit over, if folks can stay with me another 5 minutes, I'll try to wrap up in 5. After we pick the cruise and get you booked on the right company for you, the right itinerary for you, then we have to look at pre-cruise tour, what you do before the cruise, especially with air being kind of crazy. It's always good to come in at least a day early. Post-cruise, where you want to go. So Prague, as an example, tends to be pre or post add-on because it's not on the river. If you're doing the Rhine, it might be Amsterdam or Basel, or maybe Zurich or Lucerne added. Air, some cruise lines give you the option to include it or book it separately, or you could book your own. Transfers to or from the airport, some lines include it, others you can purchase. If you're booking pre or post with the cruise line, the transfers tend to be included. Insurance is one of those things that has changed a lot with the pandemic. You know, a lot of companies no longer offer Canadians insurance, as an example. So there's always other things to look at for insurance and make sure you're covered. And passport entry and exit and visa requirements. If you've been paying attention to the news, you would have seen that the visa situation for Egypt is one that changed recently. Pardon me. And so we have to always be mindful of that and make sure everything is changing to keep you up to date on that. And here, just a couple of other very different cruises you can take. You know, AMA Waterways just introduced Colombia, the Magdalena River. AMA also does the Chobe River. Uniworld does Venice. You can do the Venice Lagoon on a river cruise, which is probably the most inexpensive way you'll get to see Venice, especially with hotel prices this year. Several of my partners offer Egypt. I have a picture here from AMA, and then the Mekong River too. And we already mentioned the Amazon, and when things return, of course, then we have Russia and China that are great options as well. So there are so many options for doing river cruising besides the two big ones are certainly the Danube and the Rhine in Europe. Then we have to look at the Moselle is a beautiful cruise that a lot of folks tend to overlook. After you've done a river cruise, it's great to look at the Moselle, and the Rhine and Moselle tend to be combined often. Then, of course, you have the ones in Portugal, the Douro River, and the ones in France, the Seine, the Rhone, and Bordeaux. And that's just Europe. So and the Danube, we have the upper Danube and the lower Danube. And then, of course, we have Vietnam and Africa and Amazon and the other ones that we mentioned. So there's lots of choices. I did just want to take a minute to mention if there's anyone on board this call who can travel on November 19th, I have an exceptional offer. We had a large family group that had to cancel for an emergency, and their cabins were freed up. So this we are offering the cabins at a half price. So if you can travel, I still have a few left. I'd have to double check which cabin categories are left. But if you want to try the AMA Magna, that double wide ship, and you can go November 19th, it's an exceptional way to try this double wide ship on AMA with the pickleball court and the 3 restaurants. November 19th, it's going to be over American Thanksgiving. For the Canadians, that doesn't matter so much. Air won't be an issue for Canadians, but it will start in Vilshofen and go to Budapest. It's not going to be the Christmas markets at the beginning, but the cities will be decorated for Christmas. But by the time you get to Vienna and Budapest, the Christmas markets are open. So this will be a taste of Christmas on this double wide ship. You will never see this pricing again for the AMA Magna. So if there's any way you can do this, please let me know. And you can't book this through AMA. They do have some cabins still available at regular pricing. I have this only because we had this large group that had to cancel. So if that interests you and you are someone who's retired or who can travel at last minute, please let me know. And I also wanted to mention, I have a Wellness on Water river cruise with Uniworld. I mentioned at the beginning, I was just on Daytime Ottawa talking about this cruise. It's a woman-focused river cruise on the River Duchess, a smaller 130 passenger ship. So come be a Duchess and embrace your grace on the River Duchess. I have some special pricing for solos. I have 10 cabins at reduced pricing for a solo cabin. And of course, the double pricing. You can bring a mother, daughter, sister, or friend. You can bring a husband too if the ladies want to travel with their husbands, and they'd be most welcome. The shore excursions and the dining would all be the same. It would only be, if we have a talk, maybe 20 minutes in the morning, it would be women focused. They might want to sit that out, but of course they'd still be welcome. But if you want to travel, this is also going to be on the Danube, the Magna on the Danube I mentioned with Amma. This is going to be on the Danube and visiting Prague. So this pricing I'm showing here includes a 7-night cruise on this luxury product, everything included with Amma, Uniworld, pardon me, and then going to Prague at the end for 2 nights, October 4th to 13th next year. And that's it. I apologize, I went a couple of minutes over, but I still kept it to 5. Thank you for those that were joining. And if anyone has any questions, you can either bring your microphone on, turn your microphone on and ask, or you can type them in. But let me just take a couple of more minutes to answer some questions. Someone asked, hi, Alan Sue. They just asked, how much time during the day is typically allocated for shore excursions, and is cruising done at the night? Typically speaking, you will have excursions during the day, and you won't be sailing during the day unless you're going through that Rhine Gorge I mentioned. So that is typically 3.5 hours that you're sailing either in the morning or in the evening, afternoon rather, so you can see it. You want to see all those castles. You don't want to sail past through that during the nighttime. Typically speaking, you go on an excursion in the morning, you might come back for lunch, or you, depending on the city, and if they have to sail to get to the next spot, that'll all be communicated to you and you'll understand. But they will sometimes have free time as well. Like in Strasbourg, the last river cruise I did on the Rhine, we went to Strasbourg, we did an excursion in the morning, then we had free time for the whole afternoon. Pardon me. Some people went back to the ship to have lunch, it's included. A lot of people like to do that. I'm in Strasbourg, I want to go eat in Strasbourg and visit Strasbourg. So I stayed in the town. There were shore buses that you could take back at certain times. But I think I just stayed till the last few minutes before I had to board the ship, and I took an Uber back, which was quite easy, just because I was in a restaurant enjoying something and didn't make the last bus type thing that was scheduled. So if you're going somewhere like the Rhine Gorge, you're going to be sailing during the day, depending on the direction you're sailing, up or down. It's going to be a morning or afternoon sailing through the gorge. On that Rhine cruise as well, we actually went to Lanark Castle, and we went to a castle at night. So that shore excursion finished, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock, and we didn't sail till 10 o'clock. If you're going somewhere, if you're doing the Christmas markets, typically speaking, you're going to be overnighting in Vienna, sometimes overnighting in Budapest. You're going to be somewhere that you can go see the excursions at night in Vienna, or the Christmas markets at night. In Vienna, you're going to go see a concert. So have the option anyway, if it appeals to you. So that typically tends to be an evening option. So you generally are sailing. They never want you to miss anything. You generally are sailing in the evening or through industrial times in the nighttime. If you're sailing through somewhere beautiful they want you to see, you'll sail during the day. But river cruising is not like ocean cruising. I mean, you're only going to sail a couple of 100 miles the entire time, but they want to make sure that you're seeing as much as possible and you're taking advantage of the cities you're in as much as possible. And all of that is communicated to you on your daily cruiser, where you know exactly the all aboard time when they're ending, and the options you have for shore excursions. It's not like ocean cruising, where ocean cruising has a set time. They have to be at a wharf or a pier, and they've negotiated and contracted that. River cruising's not like that. A lot of the times it's going to be the position you are on the river, and when you come in is going to be set by the river master, who's going to dictate where the ships go. And so the movement is going to depend a lot on that. But generally speaking, you're in the port during the day and you're sailing at night, unless you're in the city overnight, as I mentioned. I had another question. If you could get a copy of the recording, certainly, Kathy, it'd be my pleasure. I'm recording it, so I'll send it out to people after. And let me just check. Are there any other questions, or anybody want to ask me anything while we're here? If not, please know that you can email me. I will send everyone who signed up a recording. I had a number of people who couldn't make it at noon, and I'm told them I'd record and send to them as well. So as you're watching the recording, if you have any questions or anything I didn't mention, tried to cover a lot of material in a very short time, which is why I was talking so quickly. But please let me know if you have any questions. Obviously, if you can go on the Amma Magna on November 19th, please let me know right away. You will not have another option to do that cruise at that time, at that price. It's just magnificent. And it's Amma's innovation for the river cruise. And if there are any women, either with a husband or a sister, friend, mother, daughter, or even a solo, please let me know about the wellness on water. You know, women, we tend not to look after ourselves so much. So the pandemic has been a time of great stress, looking after everyone else. So now it's time to embrace our own grace and take some time for ourselves and do that sunrise yoga in the morning if you wish, or just lie on those $50,000 beds and watch Europe sail by. You can do whatever you choose. Thank you everyone for joining. Oh, I just had another, someone said thank you. My pleasure, Patricia, thanks for joining me. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. Karen, my pleasure. Thank you everyone. Have a great day.